Good to see everybody today. Seems like that we have a long list of people that are sick, and then we have a long list of people that are back, and so we're kind of balancing that out. So we're really glad that everybody that's been away is back with us, and we hope that means you're feeling better. And please know that when you're gone, you are missed and prayed for and remembered and all of that. So we're glad you're all back. I spoke 3 or 4 Sundays ago about an article that I had written in the Christian Century. Jim Morrell found a copy of that on eBay. There it is. So that goes back to 1983. Good heavens, that was a long time ago. So I'll show you that so you can at least be reminded that most everything I say up here I don't make up. So you notice we've had Scrappy Moore visit with us several times over the last month or so. He had a stroke this week, so we want to remember Scrappy in our prayers. And I have no idea about the severity of it and those kinds of things, but we'll remember him. I've been gone all week to Connecticut, and I got lost. That's not my first time, but I was walking back from a meeting the other night, and it was actually cold up there, and got lost and stayed out on the streets a little longer than I would have anticipated. So if you hear that a little bit in my throat, that's where that's coming from. I was getting ready to go to bed last night, and I was leafing through a magazine that had come to the house this week, trying to get my magazines all caught up, and all of a sudden Mary Kilbride's picture staring back at me. So, Mary, appreciate that. Probably not as much as Bill, but I appreciate that. This lesson today, I've really been thinking about for a couple of months. And so I hope it'll come across with you to have something to think about as well. The 137th Psalm is a beautiful psalm that all of us know. We could probably mostly recite it. There is a very beautiful rendition of it for you all who like music that's been done by Steve Earle and Joan Baez. And so if you go in either one of those musical directions, you can look it up on the internet or get one of your grandkids to look it up for you as I did and play it. It's a beautiful song. Its title is the first line of this song. By the waters of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung up our lyres, and there our captives required of us a song, and our tormentors mirth, saying, sing to us one of the songs of Zion. And then the question rises, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? I know you know the context for this song. Children of Israel had been taken into Babylonian captivity. Not all of them were taken. The ones that were taken were the ones that the Babylonians thought would add to their civilization or do them some good. And so some were taken who were laborers, of course. Many more were taken because they were artisans. Some were taken because they were good at business and could extend the range and scope of Babylonian business enterprise. And some were taken because they had very, very special talents. Maybe their talents were that they could be good herdsmen and breed animals. Others were taken because they knew how to do almost miraculous things with plants in the desert. Some were taken because they were good singers and good entertainers. That almost always happens when people begin to be taken captive by other people. And so what we have here is a group of Hebrew singers. They have all of the equipment, and they have their voices, and they are certainly brought to Babylon to be able to do things for them that will entertain at their festive occasions or at their local events. And these people have a problem because they are being called upon to entertain and use their talents and help these people who have basically enslaved them. And they raise a very significant question, don't they? How can we really and truly become enthusiastic about singing the words of the songs of God? How can we get excited about singing the words of the songs of Zion when we are captives and we are strangers in a strange land? Now, I'd like for you to take your thinking about this verse in a couple of directions. One that is easy to understand, and one that may not be quite as easy to understand. The part that's easy to understand is that this psalm is a psalm about homesickness. I mean, that's very, very clear. And so these people who love their country and who love the identity that they had within their countries and who love the familiarity they had with the things that they did in their country, they were all experiencing this very deep and very real experience of homesickness. Well, of course they were. They were captives in Babylon. They weren't free in Israel. They were in a place where people worshiped gods that were strange to them, and they had familiarity with the God of Israel. They were being asked to do things that were not an expression of freedom and joy, but ultimately that were an expression of the bondage that they were experiencing. And so, without any equivocation, they were homesick for Israel. Now here's what I want you to think about. Homesickness is a reality that looks primarily toward the past, from where we are now, toward a time that came earlier. Homesickness is primarily a reality that relates to our past. Now, in that regard, I think every one of us is intimately aware of homesickness. And so don't you sometimes feel homesick for that time back years ago, probably, when you had all of your energies and all of your vitality and could do anything that you wanted to do as long as you wanted to do it? Don't some of you all feel homesick for those times in which you knew that you could pretty much go out and shoot a round of golf in the low 70s, and now you're not sure if you could shoot 9 holes in the low 70s, much less make it for 9 holes? Don't you sometimes feel a really powerful homesickness for those people that were a part of your life, that were so significant to defining who you were and when? And don't you remember those people at the highest moments of their own vitality and their own energies and the way that they contributed to your life? I don't think it would be strange at all if I told you that sometimes I'm homesick for my mother, or I don't think you'd find it strange at all if I told you that sometimes I get homesick for her cooking, or that I get homesick for that little house that me and my 3 brothers and my father and mother lived in Athens that was nothing to write home about from the outside, but from the inside was pretty profound. And something that was so profound that it would be almost impossible, I think, if we're human beings, not to miss it. And so I think that there are many varied ways in our lives that we can feel homesickness, and that often that is a tribute to very good times in our lives that are worth remembering, to wonderful people in our lives that are worth honoring, to wonderful events that we were involved with that were a blessing to us and that we can be very, very thankful about. Nothing pretty much surpasses those great victories in ball games that we had back then. Nothing hardly surpasses those first trips to Disney World with our children. Nothing hardly surpasses that night on the bateau when we danced on the front with the person that we loved in the Paris evening light. You see what I'm trying to say? We can understand these people intimately, because they were homesick for realities that were in their past, just like we can be homesick for realities that are in our past. How can you sing the songs of the Lord in a strange land? But here's where I'd like for you to think a little bit more deeply, and maybe in a way that you don't think about quite as often, or maybe in a way that we're all coming to the place of thinking about more than we might like. Not only is it possible to look at this section of Scripture and talk about homesickness as a phenomenon of human life, but I think it's also possible for us to talk about homelessness. Because these people in Babylon were certainly feeling homeless. I think that we can almost project onto their faces images that we see too often in the world in which we live. Here are these immigrants that are fleeing out of Guatemala and Nicaragua, making their way sometimes horrifically across Mexico and trying the best that they know how to find a better life for their children and for themselves in America or somewhere. And we look at their faces, and yeah, they may be homesick for where they came from, but right now they're feeling a sense of homelessness. They're out of place. They're out of kilter with the world. And now their view in homelessness is not so much to the past, but it's more to the future. Homelessness is a phenomenon that we can experience about the future of our lives that is manifested primarily in wondering, how in the world are we going to fit in? How in the world are we going to find a place? How in the world are we going to be able to make it in this strange land that also bears out before us and goes ahead of us? We see the faces of the people that have escaped from terrible places in the Middle East, who have made their way on nothing but rubber boats and rafts across the Mediterranean Sea, and we see them turning up on the shorelines of some of the places that we have probably visited in tourist boats. And yeah, they probably are homesick for the conditions of life that once were great for them. But the real look that's on their faces is a forward-looking look of homelessness. Where are they going to make it? Where are they going to fit in? Where is life going to turn out in any way that can be positive for them? But now here's what I'd really like for us to think about. I can understand the look of homelessness on the face of an immigrant. Understand that easily. You can too. I can understand the look of homelessness on the face of someone that is escaping terror or hurt or fear, and they don't have any other object in their lives except to run away. I can understand that sense of homelessness. But have you ever thought about all the people that probably are around you, and all of the people that are probably around you on a fairly frequent basis, that are not fleeing across Mexico, that are not fleeing from some terrorist in the Middle East. Have you ever thought about those people that are around you probably even today that are feeling a sense of homelessness? Because the home that they once knew and once contributed to has gone away, and how they're going to fit into the future, and how they're going to make it into the future, and how they're going to operate in the day-to-day of their lives into the future may not really be obvious at all, and may be the occasion of a great deal of unsettlement and fear. So you see, I think that illness could make us feel homelessness, because we don't know where those illnesses may take us, or where they may take the people that we love. And all of a sudden the cards of life get radically reshuffled. I think that aging can make us feel a sense of homelessness, because we begin to get a sense that the options that we once had when we were younger are not there as prevalently as they once were. I think that mobility can give us a sense of homelessness. And it really hurts, doesn't it, when we start having to think about what we're going to do to allow us to be as mobile in the future as we have been in the past. Isn't it interesting that we all kind of by now have gotten to a time where we're beginning to think, well, I wonder what might be the best brand of cane for me out there in the future. I wonder what might be the best deal I can get on a rollator out there in the future. I wonder if all of those bathing apparatuses that now a really old-looking Pat Boone shows up in, is that going to be part of my future? And I think that we begin to wonder, will I fit out there? Will I be able to find comfort out there? Will I be able to find a place out there? Will I be able to find anything that would have a hint of home about it? Or will I experience homelessness? You know, I think it behooves us to look around to people that we know and love and that fill our world, and wonder if sometimes some of them aren't feeling a little of this homelessness, and wonder sometimes if we might not be a bridge to them feeling something that's better than worse, that's less fearful than more fearful, that is maybe even in a positive way rather than a negative that might be a part of their lives. I'm going to say something I bet you haven't heard anybody say very much. I admire my mother-in-law. You haven't heard a lot of people say that, I suspect. My mother-in-law got to be about 88 years old. Her husband had been dead for 20 years. She'd continue to work. She'd continue to drive. She'd continue to take care of herself. She'd continue to not allow, you've had mother-in-laws like this, anyone to fix the Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners except her. But then you begin to see that her capacity to be able to do that was diminishing. Of course it was. She was in her late 80s. You would begin to see the frustration on her face when someone else was in the kitchen cooking, not doing it exactly like her or bringing the food. And of course, you would anticipate that kind of frustration. And then she began to worry. She began to worry that that roof that she got up on until her middle 80s and cleaned the leaves out of the gutters, she couldn't get up on anymore, and sometimes it leaked. She began to worry that sometimes when she went into the basement that, yes, there was a little water over in the corner, maybe 5 tablespoons full, but maybe that meant the deluge was coming at any moment. She began to wonder what she would do about that tree in the backyard that began to fall. And then she began to sit in her den with the curtains drawn in the dark, and and just kind of wait for the end to come. Homelessness, not knowing how she was going to fit, if she could fit in the future. But I admire her because she gave long-term living arrangements a chance. And she went with the help of Phyllis and her brother to a really pretty nice place that they have there in Athens. And it was no time at all until, in spite of the negatives that are there that you can complain about, and the lack of perfections that are there that weren't exactly like her home, and the things that could be better, like any of those places, she began to refer to where she lived as her home. Now, I've not exactly figured out why the people that live across the hall from her are her across the street neighbors, but I kind of get that. And it's amazing how even in that difficult place, and even with the difficulties that she feels in her life, that are real, that she's still able to eke out something of a sense of home that becomes important to the sustenance of her life. I wonder if we're up to that challenge. I wonder if we're up to the challenge of times in our lives when we are encased about by homesickness, or times in our lives when we are encased about by homelessness, and we're not exactly sure how we're going to fit going into the future. To have enough strength of character, or whatever the terminology is for it, to be able to try to still eke out something of a semblance of home. I have a lot of admiration for some people that I know right now. I have a lot of admiration for a man and his company in Louisiana by the name of Keith Myers. Keith Myers and his wife Ginger, about 40 years ago, looked into the community where they lived and found 5 homeless people that needed ministry, and began to make sure that the needs of their daily lives were met. She was a nurse, he was a businessman. Now they have one of the biggest home care businesses in America. And although they've made a lot of money from that and become very successful, at the core of their lives is the idea that there are people out there that are homeless. Now they may still be in a building, but they still feel that. They may still have some viability in their lives, but they still feel that. And these people are giving their lives to create care for these people who don't exactly know where they fit anymore. I know a couple of people in this town, one a little bit, a guy named Greg Vital, one a little better, a man named Franklin Farrah. Bill knows Franklin, who have a home advanced living facility organization. And if you hear Franklin Farrah stand up and talk about that, or if you hear Greg Vital talk about that, they don't talk all the time about what's going to be their next facility, or where they're going to have their next growth, or what the census is of where they are now. But you'll hear them talk about feeling the need when they were younger men of reaching out and helping people that were at stages in their lives that they didn't exactly know where they were going to turn. And realizing that they could not make a turn for those people that was perfect, but they could make a turn for those people that were better. There are a lot of people that you and I know that are homesick today. And maybe we all are in some ways. But there's a lot of people that we know today that have a sense of homelessness. They don't know how the world's going to work out for them. They don't know if they're going to fit. They don't know if they're going to be able to make it. And maybe as we think about the people that we want to reach out to, those immigrants that are making their way out of Central America, those people that are fleeing terror in the Middle East, and that list could go on, couldn't it? Maybe we could also think about those people around us, many of whom we know their names, who may be sitting in the dark in their den, and not knowing how they're going to fit tomorrow, not knowing how they're going to make it tomorrow, don't know how they're going to find their tomorrow. Maybe they're experiencing some homelessness that our care or our love or our time might be able to speak to and might be able to help. How do we sing the songs of God in a strange land? How do we find joy in the strangeness of sickness or aging or fear? Maybe those are questions that more people that we know than we might imagine are asking every day of our lives. Let us pray. Help us, our Father, to get a greater sense of who the people may be around us that we could reach out to. Help us that we might get a greater sense of perhaps even obligation to reach out, even with a phone call. Because we may all come to the time in which this homelessness, this worry toward the future of how we will fit, could be a part of all of our lives. So yes, Lord, help us to look at those exceptional and awful places in the world where people need care. But help us that we might also look close at hand to those that need care. For we want to sing your songs, and we want to have your joy. But sometimes that is very hard when our world is strange to us. We ask our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all for coming today. Charles, Maggie, we're okay, they say. Thank you all.
By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept for Zion. By the moping willows in her midst we sadly hung there our harps. Our captor said, come sing a song of joy. How can we sing when joy is gone? If I forget Jerusalem, may my right hand its cunning lose. Hearts pine away for Jerusalem, golden city of our God. Bitter are the tears we cry for thee, O Lord, so far, far away from you. Behold, horizon shine. Oh, oh, oh. Yeshua comes, the nations shall rejoice. Then will we all return with him to Zion. on a way for Jerusalem, golden city of our God. Due to all the tears we cry for thee, O Lord, so far, far away from you. And now we look for yet a better day, when the Holy One returns to restore eternal Jerusalem and to bring our people home, and to bring our people home, and to bring